how did that shape your direction, about, your health career journey and how you approach things, and how has it kind of informed what you do today?
Right. So I think overall, it definitely transforms my viewpoint in terms of my career pathway, in terms of what I kind of, in terms of my larger kind of perspective, I would say. I think that I had no idea about kind of the public health world. I had no idea in terms of the nonprofit world. If you would have asked me, Evita, what does that mean? I would have been like, I don't know. I had no clue. And in terms of my approach, so kind of from the perspective I had, I saw that in terms of, so I grew up very, so in terms of my grandmother on my dad's side was a curandera. So I grew up with a very deep respect of kind of alternative medicine, and also just a deep respect of kind of how individuals saw the world and how that interplayed in terms of medicine and their health and their views about the world. And I think that I knew kind of in terms of my own interactions with families, how that kind of healthcare physician patient interaction wasn't working, because a lot of my family on my dad's side are monolingual Spanish speakers. And so they would joke around and tell me, Evita, they would tell me in Spanish, like, oh, that ese doctor no sabe de nada. That doctor doesn't know anything. And doctor told me not to eat tortillas or to make these modifications. And for them, it was like, well, tortillas, that's part of every meal. That's kind of one of the things that we do, or there was kind of modifications. And so there was a complete kind of just breakdown in terms of communication. And they would joke with me and tell me kind of how that interaction wasn't kind of working. And so I think overall, on a small scale, I knew that I wanted to be an advocate in terms of, one, utilizing interpreters appropriately, but also in terms of that breakdown and kind of appreciation of the cultural aspects of patients, and kind of embracing that and making sure that was central to the treatment plan. But also, I think, and I knew I wanted to do that on an individual scale. But I think in terms of advocacy, there was a lot of things that I kind of grew up seeing that I wanted to change, but I didn't know exactly how to kind of make those changes, or how to, in terms of how my role. And I became very, very interested in terms of pipeline and in increasing diversity within higher education. I was tired of being one of 300 and not seeing kind of other individuals like myself in the classroom. And it's like, how is this possible? This is a big university, and I feel like one in a classroom of 300. And so I think I started kind of seeing different goals that I wanted to see, and the power of HCC was that I was able to see that, one, I wanted to kind of impact the community. I wanted to kind of have a larger role, and also work with these phenomenal organizations. Like Reach Out is an amazing organization in terms of all the stuff that they do. In terms of, I mean, I feel sometimes when I hear Diana Fox, the executive director, talk about all the work that Reach Out does, it kind of pulls at my heartstrings. I'm like, in terms of kind of the parent-child dynamic. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, so that's so important in terms of social determinants of health, and that's what they're doing. In terms of kind of pipeline work, they're also doing that. So I think that in terms of all the work of everything I'm super passionate about, they do. And so thanks to HCC, I was introduced to Reach Out. I was introduced to the Latino Health Collaborative, and also to amazing mentors, and that have continued to kind of, in terms of kind of my growth and my continued growth, because I'm still growing and they've got lots to learn. And so so I think that it's been really helpful in that.
That's great, and great, glad to hear. You mentioned you're a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Can you talk a little bit about how you chose that path, and then kind of a little bit about what you do now and how you're putting your the things that you just talked about as priorities into practice in the work that you're doing?
Right. So in terms of and so I'm very, I think in terms of, it's a long process in terms of what got me to this point. It's very interesting because when I started off, I wanted to be a family medicine doctor, because I learned early on that if I wanted to implement a change in my patient, because initially I was interested in pediatrics, that I needed to address the whole family. The whole family had to make changes together, because there was no way in heck I was going to make one change for one patient in a silo. And so that's kind of one thing over time that I learned to appreciate, especially within Latino and the Latino like subunit. It's a unit, it's a family, and so if you wanted to make kind of one change, the larger unit as a whole had to be addressed. And so I originally went to medicine wanting to be a family medicine doctor, and I think overall, if you would have asked me kind of throughout, even up to my third year of medical school, Evita, do you ever think you'll be a psychiatrist? And I would have said, no, heck no, that's impossible. That's just never going to happen. And the interesting part, if you would have asked me as a psychiatry resident in that first year, Evita, do you ever think you'll be a child and adolescent psychiatrist? And I distinctly remember I was working, and one of my colleagues asked, hey, I think you'd be really good. You should think about it. And I was like, no, there's no way. I'm not doing that. And here I am. And that always kind of reminds me of the Magic School Bus and Miss Frizzle, in terms of make mistakes, get messy, and then just kind of a lot of times we plan things in terms of the way that our journey is going to be, and life has a funny way of saying, oh really, that's what you had planned, but in a very beautiful way, because I'm very grateful for the work that I do. I'm very passionate. I care deeply about stigma. I care greatly about addressing kind of the cultural aspects of how each individual sees depression, sees ADHD, sees kind of these various diagnoses. Because a lot of times I'm having conversations with parents or adults about, because I'm also treating adults, in terms of kind of what is ADHD, and kind of explaining kind of it's not something that they're choosing, that they can't sit in their chair and they're distracted. It's a brain network problem, and it's nothing that they're choosing. Or in terms of depression, they're not choosing to not get out of bed, or I think in terms of sometimes for parents, they're like, well, they don't seem sad, and I think there's this really powerful image in terms of multiple faces and of individuals that have dealt with depression, and they're smiling. And I think that in terms of depression, everyone experiences a little bit differently. And it may not be that kind of the face that you see is someone that is sad. They may be kind of internally masking it. And so I think that I have those conversations about kind of what is depression, and also kind of a respect, because I think that it's one of the aspects of child and adolescent psychiatry. It's a collaboration in terms of therapists, teachers, parents, grandparents, and the child itself, and so it's a teamwork effort. And I always want my families to feel that we're in this together. I'm not dictating treatment, and the ultimate goal is the best for the patient, and doing the best that we can. And sometimes that is medicine, and sometimes that's not. And so I think kind of exploring and making sure that we're addressing kind of the multiple components in the family dynamic is important. And I think that in terms of what led me to it is I actually, and kind of one of the reasons why I struggled in terms of kind of choosing psychiatry was that I personally, if you would have asked me kind of that third year of medical school, what do you think of psychiatrists? I would have been like, well, they're cold, unfeeling, and they don't care about their patients. But I learned over time that was not the case. So in your third year, you rotate through these different sites, and you see kind of firsthand, because medicine is like an apprenticeship, and you see firsthand kind of what the job is, and you get kind of a small sliver of a taste. And so I think that I realized, wow, these are individuals that are transforming kind of these individuals' lives. I was at the VA, and I saw some really kind of psychotic individuals who are hearing or seeing things and in terms of kind of their reality, and was a little bit off, and so the medicines helped, and they were functioning again. And I was very kind of just amazed by it, and how much the team cared about the patient. And so over time, I realized that I wanted to kind of the experiences that I had experienced with a family member. I kind of wanted to not challenge that, but channel that energy into kind of being an advocate, and kind of making sure that those experiences that I had as a family member, that none of my kind of families experienced that. And so that's why I've been involved in NAMI. In residency, I ran a patient support group, and I even did one in Spanish to address stigma. And I think, again, that's kind of one of the things that for any students that are on this webinar is that there's lots of individuals that can teach you things, lots of individuals that have information to teach you. And I learned a lot from my patients. I learned a lot from those families in terms of their experiences, in terms of just their wisdom that they had to share. And it was very powerful for me. And kind of some of those experiences fueled me, and that kind of solidified child and adolescent psychiatry was my home, and that's where I was meant to be. So definitely, but it was a journey, and it was a lot of different pieces. But again, I think something that helped was lots of great mentorship along the way. And I always use that term loosely, because mentors can do a lot of different things in terms of kind of helping you see that vision of kind of staying kind of in terms of what your passion is, or just being sometimes even just a voice of support, that they may not know kind of the direction for you, but at least kind of there to be a sounding board, or just to encourage you along your way in your journey.
That's great, and we're so glad that you made it all the way through that journey, and that you're doing the work that you're doing. As you know, there is a huge shortage of psychiatrists, and child and adolescent psychiatrists in particular, and particularly people who are bilingual, bicultural, who can really connect with communities and provide that type of patient-centered care that you, culturally responsive care that you talked about. What advice might you have for students who are thinking about becoming a behavioral health professional, and maybe kind of questioning, whether they should do it or not, and how they should know, and then how they could be successful in their pursuit? What kind of advice might you have for them? Because we clearly need more, and HCC is a big champion for having people go more into behavioral health, and we're creating more opportunities like that for our students and alums. So what advice do you have for them?
So in terms of, I think definitely I would kind of strongly echo kind of nationwide, there's a huge shortage of child and adolescent psychiatrists. And then if you kind of bring the layer down in terms of Spanish speaking psychiatrists, even huge, large, super need. And so I think that in terms of so we need you. And I always, whenever I talk to students, I have a big slide that says we need you, because we definitely do. I think that one is NAMI is a great organization that does a lot of advocacy work. And so I think that if sometimes kind of depending on where you are in terms of kind of career pathway, they're a great organization in terms of kind of getting your feet wet. And I think that's the really cool aspect of HCC is that they put you in organizations that you may not realize that they're doing kind of work in regards to mental health, and bringing you back to reach out. I think that they, in terms of kind of the parenting groups, and in terms of they have a program within high school students to try to increase diversity within the mental health field. And so they have a lot of programming kind of in terms of that specific aspect. So I think I think within the organization, there's lots of really great nonprofits that are trying to get exposure to students, because for me, I think the only exposure I had was through that family member, and it was a very negative experience. And so I think that we definitely want individuals to have positive experiences, and also to see that there is a lot of really amazing work that's being done. Definitely, I started off as a family medicine resident, and I matched into a family medicine residency, and then I switched into psychiatry. And so what I would say is that one is that I think continually to reach out to mentors or to individuals that are in different fields, have conversations with them about what their kind of field looks like, what their day to day. I think that Mi Mentor has a lot of kind of different forums in terms of different kind of different fields of medicine, PA, and kind of different medical students that talk about kind of their experiences. So definitely use that platform in terms of kind of getting information, kind of learning more, having those conversations. I think that I think within my own family, my family had there was a transition process, because I distinctly remember having conversations with various individuals of my family. One that my dad was like, "Oh, vas a ser mansa loca. You're going to be calming crazy people." That's what he said in Spanish. And or my sister was said like, "Hey, you're not going to be a real doctor now anymore," and that's not true. I think that one of the things that and when I said when I was a medical student I got a sliver is because I feel like there was so much that I still didn't see in terms of all the work that psychiatry is a very there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the work that you do, in terms of kind of doing video visits, working kind of consults in the hospital, kind of working. So there's a lot of different kind of aspects that you can do within psychiatry, in terms and definitely even as a medical student, I didn't get even a sliver of all the different aspects. So I think the more you talk to individuals, the more you kind of try to get as much exposure, and I think to different organizations that are doing work on different levels, whether that be kind of advocacy work in terms of different nonprofits. It's very powerful. And I think that at the end of the day, I was thinking about how I wanted to I was thinking yesterday about what I wanted to present. And one of the things I also kind of going off topic for just a minute, is self-care, right? Because we are all really, we care a lot, we want to do a lot, but we won't get there if we don't take care of ourselves. And I know that Jeff, kind of, you've given a mindfulness workshop, and I think that I really do like mindfulness because it can be done in like 30 seconds, and it can be embedded throughout your day. And no one ever has to know about what you're doing. You can just sit there and mindfully drink a glass of water, and or mindfully eat something, or just kind of take a few slow, deep breaths. And so I think that that's kind of one thing that I hope that in terms of I challenge everyone to do is that in terms of that self-care, in terms of going outside, in terms of kind of those small things, so that you can be ready, you can have that fuel to kind of make the change that we need in the world. Because just as Jeff said, I don't want to be I want more. Meaning that I don't want to. Like, I think one nickname that myself and a couple colleagues have is we don't want to be unicorn providers. We don't want to be kind of this rarity that doesn't exist. And so I think overall that's kind of one thing that because everyone's perspective is really important. The way we see individuals, the way that we see kind of the family dynamic, we all have an interesting perspective to share. And so I think that to get there, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And so I definitely kind of want to challenge everyone just to something small in terms of self-care.
Self-care is absolutely critical, particularly now. And sort of a two-part question for you. How do you do self-care for yourself and take care of all of the demands you have? Because you're not only an amazing clinician and an advocate, but you're also a mother, and and with children at home, and a lot of people are struggling with that, right now. And so how do you take care of yourself in the process? And then also any advice you have beyond what you've already shared for how all of us can take care of ourselves given the stresses of the pandemic and of the systemic racism and other things that we're confronted with now, the economic situation. How else might we take care of ourselves, and how might we pay attention to, when we might need help as well?
Right. So I think, so I'll start with so I think, and it's interesting because every day I have these conversations with patients. And I think one of the things that is always striking to me is how many times people are going outside and in terms of, and getting kind of some vitamin D, some sunshine. And I think that, and I'll have conversations where the person hasn't been outside all week. And I think that that's something that definitely we know we have kind of diagnoses related to kind of how much sunshine, or kind of where we are in the country, and how much sunlight we're getting exposed to. And so definitely kind of sunlight, and it really does have an effect on mood. And so I think that overall, I think kind of getting that sunshine, getting that vitamin D, stepping outside, getting some movement. And it's hard. I wholeheartedly agree. I think Jeff and I were having this conversation before the session about, I have 3 kids. I have an 8, a 6, and a 3-year-old. And in terms of trying to kind of consciously make an effort for them to get sunshine, for them to get outside time. And it really is a conscious effort to make those things happen. So I think, but again, I feel like it's those small things that really make the difference in terms of, and it sounds, I think it's funny in terms of you go through this whole process to learn all these complicated things, but at the same time, it's the basic things in life that really make a big impact and are really, really important too. And so in terms of kind of that sunshine, I've been working on drinking more water and just kind of those little things, making sure that we're getting that physical activity in. Because I think that one thing nationally, and I'm having conversations all the time about how much we're not moving and how that's impacting in terms of just so many different things, whether that be kind of increase in weight gain and with all kind of the different medical problems that could come with increased weight gain, diabetes, high blood pressure, and those aspects, deconditioning. And so I think overall, I think that's really important. And I think whether that be just kind of walking around the neighborhood if it's safe, or walking around your backyard if you have access to one, or just kind of walking around your wherever it's safe and possible to do some physical activity. So I think that because again, I think those small things really do add up in terms of that kind of that little piggy bank in terms of overall health and wellness. I think that one thing that has become more and more profound over time, loneliness, and I definitely am coming across that a lot. And so really trying to, I know that sometimes it's extra work in terms of making that effort to contact other individuals, whether it be through Zoom or, but I think making sure that we're kind of, as time progresses and as winter kind of progresses, that we're still kind of making those kind of connections. We're still connecting with individuals. And I agree. Like, I feel like sometimes when I'm kind of doing an assessment on a patient or a family, I almost feel like we have been through a lot. 2020, I think, just kind of, I mean, our whole life has turned upside down in such a short amount of time. And it's been really hard, and I can definitely empathize with parents of all ages in terms of it's really hard, and it's been really hard, and I think that recognizing that and acknowledging that is really important. And it was interesting until September. I was like, wow, I was so tired, and I didn't realize how, and I hadn't appreciated the impact of just everything changing on myself. And so I think that it's really important also to check in with each ourselves and say, hey, what's going on? How are we doing today? And it sounds really silly, but I think that's kind of one of the pieces of mindfulness, is that kind of checking in with self and saying, well, how am I doing? What's going on? And so I think that's really important. I feel like with this whole process from February to I think around August, September, that's the first time I finally realized, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm feeling really tired. What's going on? And it's just, there's been so much. And so I feel like it's really important to acknowledge kind of everything that has gone on, but also in terms of kind of engaging in the healthy things. Routine is important. Sleep is important. I feel like we all have our digital leashes. And so I think that deconnecting from those things, because there is positive things to connecting with other individuals, but there's also a lot of kind of really stressful, negative things. And I think that also, I think one positive, I'm always looking for tidbits. And so I think one positive tidbit that I came across was kind of picking one news source and kind of constraining the times that you were engaging with kind of that news source, so that you're making sure that it's helpful and you're keeping informed, but at the same time, it's not consuming and being a source of stress and negativity. And so balancing that out, or kind of timing it when you're exposing yourself, so that you have kind of some self-care tied with it afterwards. And so I think that that's really, really important. And then I think that, but I mean, I would wholeheartedly agree. I mean, just so much has gone on, and it just, and even like in the past month, I would say there's been so much. And so, so I would definitely agree. But I think in terms of the answer, in terms of what I do for self-care, so I do a lot of gardening, and so I work a lot with kind of plants, and I think that I like to say that my grandmother, I mentioned, was a curandera, and worked in terms of, she was a spiritual healer, and did a lot in terms of healing with plants and prayer. And so I think that I definitely enjoy working with plants, and I feel like it's my vitamin D. I'm like moving with dirt, and my kids and I, we kind of go through there's a couple nurseries next to my house, and so that's kind of one of the self-care. And then exercise, I think across time, kind of finding ways to kind of exercise has been something that's been key. But I think more and more I've been kind of with Jeff, in terms of the mindfulness. I've started doing more and more mindfulness. I started that yesterday, and so my plan is that ever so often I'll take I do gratitude exercises, where I'll stop, and I like Thanksgiving because it's kind of a nationwide kind of pause to reflect on what is going well or what's going okay now. And I think that it's really important, because I feel like, and even in terms of biologically, the way we're wired, there's that our brain, we have to fight our brain, because our brain kind of focuses on the negative and what's not going well. And it makes sense why we do that, for survival and for but I think overall, I think I do that a lot, in terms of, I kind of pause and reflect in terms of kind of what's going well, and what or just kind of different things that I'm grateful for. And so I think that that's kind of been one thing that I've kept throughout, in terms of just doing gratitude exercises, and making sure that the people that when someone, like, acknowledging in the individuals that are in my life that are doing amazing things, or that I'm lucky to have them, I feel like I'm lucky to have them in my life, I try to let those people know. And whether it be kind of a text or a message, or coworkers, like, thank you, I appreciate you, or making sure that we acknowledge, because I feel like we don't do that enough. We let people know when they're not doing things, but we don't let them know in terms of all the lots of little things that they do all the time, of things that they're doing great. We don't acknowledge kind of those kind of silent kind of heroes in the background. And so I try to do that too.
That's great. Where do you get your satisfaction from your work? You work really hard, you're dealing with challenging patient and family situations. Where do you get your satisfaction?
So I would say that there's a lot of different aspects in terms of that. So one I feel is that I think one of the things is that, and I'm not sure exactly where I learned this from, but I think in terms of a 2 to 3 sentence mission statement, and I think it might have been HCC that taught me this, in terms of kind of that running statement of who you are, and not necessarily who you are, but what you hope to do with your lifetime. And I think that I strongly feel like I really appreciate Albert Schweitzer's words of my life, my mission, and in terms of living a life of purpose and meaning, along the lines of Viktor Frankl. So, Man's Search for Meaning, great book.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of trying to, and so I feel like for me, and I think that after, I think especially after the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I feel like even now more than ever, I think in terms of advocacy, increasing diversity within higher education, and that mission is really important to me, in terms of, and also in terms of my children, because I feel like that's a big motivator, that I want the world to be a better place for them. And I think that there's a lot of different stories that have led to for me to be here today. And so my grandfather went to a segregated school, and my grandmother didn't learn to read until she was in her 60s. I want to say 60s, 70s, around there, when she finally learned to sign her name, and that was something that really meant something was really important to her. And so I think I've been raised with a strong appreciation of the history that has allowed me to get to this point, but know that there is definitely a journey ahead. So for my children and for future generations. So I think in terms of my satisfaction, it's in that line of kind of that mission statement that kind of helps me remember what my goal is. And in terms of I've had life experiences along the way that has kind of shown me that life is short, and life is not guaranteed. And there's a lot of kind of unexpected events that happen, and that kind of has heightened that importance of kind of living a life that is meaningful, and kind of trying to kind of make an impact as much as we can. And I have three little faces that are continual reminders of kind of that mission.
That's terrific, and it's so wonderful to see that you're putting that mission, you're living your mission, which is not your purpose, both with your work and with your family, and by being somebody who's focusing on changing policies and increasing diversity in the health professions and all those things, which is I've always admired that about you. And you also returned to the Inland Empire where you're from to serve, which was also part of your purpose and your mission. So any final advice that you have for students who want to follow in your leadership footsteps to sort of put their purpose into practice and live according to their mission and values?
So I think I just wanted to make one comment, and it's so before answering that question. So the one comment I wanted to make is that a lot of times when I do kind of any work with students or kind of do any talks, I purposely wear kind of an embroidered shirt, or I try to make that a conscious effort. One is that I remember I used to wear embroidered shirts a lot when I was a resident at UCI. And I got comments from kind of different individuals asking me what restaurant I worked at, and so I think that one is that I have a deep pride for my culture, for my heritage. I think that in terms of kind of exploring kind of what each individual's heritage and means to them, because it's very different, even in my own family, kind of culture is very individual, and there's so many aspects to it. And so I think that so I just wanted to, just kind of changing in terms of our association and stereotypes, and challenging that stereotype, and in terms of just kind of a beauty and just appreciation for my heritage and culture. In terms of words of wisdom for students, I would say, again, I have many role models, and one of them being Miss Frizzle, in that make mistakes, get messy. Life is a beautiful process. There are challenges that come along the way, and we all have had many of them. And I bet you kind of every single individual on this webinar and that sees this webinar has had many challenges, and maybe even many challenges within the past month. And so I think that kind of along those lines, I think that to be resilient, we need to take care of ourselves, or else it's really hard to kind of get up when a challenge or obstacle stands in kind of in front of us, and to kind of see that there's a light. So I would say that definitely that self-care is really, really important, so that we can bounce back, we can dust ourselves off and say, I'm ready, I have a mission, I need to get there. And so I definitely have that reflection. And the other thing is that I like the si se puede, si se pudo. So it can be done, and it will be done. And so I think that whenever students feel like there's a long history of warriors that have fought for your ability to be where you are now, for your ability to be a student, to kind of be an advocate. And so I think that remembering kind of that strong heritage of warriors, multiple warriors, of individuals. So I think that's really, really important, and warriors that continue to fight. Jeff, you've been a huge advocate, and definitely appreciate you and your advocacy, and in terms of your kind of continuing fight to in terms of diversity and higher education, and in the healthcare and field, among other things. I'm missing tons of other things that you've done, but I think overall, kind of remembering that, because sometimes I feel like we feel like, well, it can't be done. Like, yes, it can be. And then the mentorship part. I think that if anybody leaves anything away from this webinar is that the power of mentorship. I am very grateful for all the mentors along the way that have taught me so many things. And I would say that a lot of times individuals focus on mentors being only individuals individuals in their field. And I would say that's a big mistake. You want mentors of all different fields. And Diana Fox has been an incredible mentor. And she's taught me a lot along the way in terms of leadership, in terms of just the way that she's grown Reach Out, in terms of the work and impact it's had. It's just phenomenal. Jeff, you're an amazing individual who I continue to be astounded by all the work that you do. And so I think overall, I think that in terms of mentorship is just kind of having an open mind, because a lot of individuals have a lot to teach you. And it's just, you have to kind of listen or be kind of pause enough to be able to be aware. I think one of the things that I had an amazing program director in terms of my fellowship, and very, very powerful kind of skill that she honed in me was the power of observation in terms of meetings, who was speaking, who was not speaking, why, and in terms of those dynamics and observing those dynamics. And so I think that was really, really powerful. And so you can learn a lot of different ways. And so I think that again, make mistakes, get messy in terms of Miss Frizzle, and definitely reach out in terms of mi mentor. And there's lots of different ways in terms of getting mentorship, and people want to mentor you and want to see you grow. And just like Jeff said, we need you. I can't stress enough now more than ever, like in terms of there's such a huge need now more than ever.
Well, thank you so much for being an inspiring and impactful leader, and for all the inspiring and impactful words you shared on the interview today. It's so good to see you. Appreciate your time. Please continue with your leadership and the impact on your patients, communities, and families. And we look forward to being a part of your journey as you go forward. Thanks for your support of HCC and our alumni and students. And please take care. And thanks to everybody else for joining us today. We'll continue with our leadership series on the 15th. We have Billy Caceres, who's one of our HCC alums, who's a professor at Columbia, professor of nursing. Evita, thanks so much. And all the best to you and your family. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.